And I recently returned from a trip traveling with my backpack, different countries around the world. And as I'm listening to you this morning, my energy here feels dramatically uncomfortable compared to my energy of traveling. And when I travel from listening, feeling, lightness, ease, and flow. And back here, I'm doing something differently that's feeling uncomfortable.
Give us more.
The feeling of lightness.
When you say here, where do you mean here?
United States. TV, politics, advertisement, conversation, intellect, concepts. And when I was traveling...
Let's not just assign it to those specific things, although they certainly are a part of it. But we talked earlier about the factors that are present in one of those uplifting daydreams, and it's the absence of responsibility, the absence of trying to make anything happen. You are freer out there because you've pre-paved, you've segment intended, you've set that time aside. And so it's not the fact of being out there back here, it's the permission that you've given yourself to be free of the entanglements of whatever.
And I'm finding here, intellectually, leaning toward blaming the conditions for how I'm feeling. And I know that's never true.
But it's not uncommon to do it because conditions are often the basis of contrast. So they are of value. But a condition that controls the way you feel, then the momentum of it has gone too far, which means just too much emphasis on something that you cannot do anything about. But you have complete control over the relationship between your desires and your moment of focus. You have complete control over moving toward what you're wanting. And so if you could be back here, as you say, and focus on those kinds of things, Esther does it too, briefly and momentarily, and let it launch some rockets, and you could find a way to look in the direction of the desire that keeps hatching, then what's going on here could be the basis of many interesting, blissful, connected, leading edge thoughts.
So as you're doing that demonstration with your hands, when I'm traveling, it feels like the desires are more prevalent and more clear, and back here, they're not. I just haven't done that.
And why? Because there are not so many conditions that I'm focused upon that I bring into my mix that cause the resistance.
Right.
That leads to a determination that I want to be better at not letting it go so far, paying attention to the momentum. Because you're right, you've pointed something out, and we're going to emphasize it too. It doesn't need to be this way, but it usually is. The conditions of travel make it easier to be in alignment than the conditions of being at home. So there is a conditional response to life, which sometimes serves you and sometimes doesn't, but it feels like a cork on a raging sea where you don't have much control. Where if you get out ahead of it, in other words, think about when you make a decision to travel. You pick a place that you'd like to be. You usually pick it at a time of year that is most conducive. In other words, you're pre-paving. You're imagining it in the most satisfying way that you can imagine it. Could you do that when you are at home? Could you get out ahead of it?
Yeah, I actually got ahead of this, wondering or thinking to myself, before coming here, what an awesome conversation we had this morning. And so as I'm listening to you this morning, I'm getting the feeling for myself of being more active in that pre-paving.
So when we say get out ahead of it, now let's chew on this a little bit, because this is really where the power of life is. This is really where the power of creation is. Let's just start with an absolute premise. Non-physical has less resistance than physical. Thought has less resistance than something that you're focused upon. Manifestation, which you can see and hear and smell and taste and touch, those manifestations are full of the vibration that allowed them to come about. So isn't it logical that if something is manifested and you are gazing toward it, that there's quite a bit of bang for your buck in that, so to speak? But there's one distinction really worth making. Non-physical, in its non-resistant nature, is so much more powerful. But until you've really focused in a non-physical way and felt the power of it. In other words, Esther stands here translating for us and gives the appearance, an accurate appearance of someone who really knows what she is talking about. But to almost anyone who is watching this, they might leave with an explanation. Well, she's just sure of what she's speaking about. She has strong convictions, and it's just another opinion, which I can take or leave, which is certainly true, which I can benefit from or not, which is certainly true. But if you feel some resonance with some of what you hear here, and you catch a glimpse of this being under the influence of the energy that creates worlds, and you for a moment don't do that thing that keeps you from that influence, so you find it. Maybe you meditate on a regular basis and find that quiet space, and then some things start flowing into your mind, as we talked about earlier, and it's an idea, or even more an impulse, that when you follow it, like the travel, it really has a big payoff for you. And you make that association between receiving that thought and following through on it. Then this is more than just an opinion. Then this is something that you yourself have lived, and you yourself have lived it on many, many, many occasions. You know the difference between a thought that is really powerful and one that is not. So since you brought it up, let's talk about politics just briefly, and the competing sides, so to speak, and how almost without exception the individuals involved have rendered themselves powerless because they're pushing so hard against the other. And so whatever looks like it's winning is just the meanest of the mean. In other words, it's just the one who's most disconnected and most comfortable in that being disconnected. But there's a whole other thing that's going on. There are billions of people on the planet that are witnessing anything and everything and launching rockets of desire. And there is a vibrational reality that you might call a future experience that isn't future tense, it's present tense, that is right here, right now, from which you can derive satisfaction, but not while you're pushing against any of that. And so future governments, future experiences, future everythings are coming from this vortex, which could not exist without all of that. And so if there is this profound appreciation from anyone about anyone and everyone who is contributing to the vortex, not taking a side and not pushing against any of it, but just recognizing that powerful minds coming together and asking for what they want. Can you imagine if all of them were asking, with all of the experience in life and in government and in humanity that they have witnessed, the collective intelligence and experience of all of those people? Let's just talk singularly about the politicians for a moment, and let's acknowledge what they're asking for, and then take away their battle and just look at their ask, and then just be one who doesn't battle anymore, who just blisses out in travel, and who receives blocks of thought. We're not asking you to receive a block of thought and write a book and save the world, because the world doesn't need to be saved. We're just saying to you that there is satisfaction beyond your ability right now to even discern it or absorb it or acknowledge it, that is there for you to receive as a result of all this stuff that you think you want to travel away from so that you don't have to experience.